you're safe and sound. Welcome everyone to our weekly Islamic parenting live streaming that happens every single Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And as you all know, that the first ayah that the angel Jibreel asked the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam to recite when they first met is Iqra, which means in Arabic, read. So as you all know, that Islam all the time urges us to read, to learn, to seek knowledge, and there are a lot of ayahs, a lot of hadith, a lot of stories about this topic. That's why we have this super interesting topic for today, which is the etiquettes of seeking knowledge in Islam. And today, Alhamdulillah, we are joined with Imam Husam Eddin Alam. Salamu alaikum, Imam. How are you doing?
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله شيخ محمد. I hope you are
Alhamdulillah.
doing great as well.
Alhamdulillah,
الحمد
thank you
لله.
very much. Imam Hussam, he's
May
the
I
head of
help?
education at Muslimito Institution. He's a member of Al Azhar Fatwa Global Center. He's a lecturer at Faculty of Sharia and Law at Al Azhar University. So, Imam, I'm actually super interested in this topic, and I'd really like to hear a lot from you. So, would you please give us like a background about this topic, or would you please like elaborate this topic, give us an intro about this topic, please?
Yes, indeed it is. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Almighty, the Lord of the worlds. May Allah's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon His peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you, Sheikh Muhammad, all our dear respected viewers from across the globe. Definitely, it's a very interesting and timely topic as well to speak of the significance and the noble status of seeking knowledge in Islam. It is very important as we are approaching this topic to always keep in mind a very powerful verse in the noble Quran, and 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 the significance of this verse stems from the fact that it is the very first command in the noble Quran,
Yeah,
and it is one that you have actually mentioned and highlighted, Sheikh Muhammad, in the very introduction to today's webinar, and that's Iqra, the command and the clear instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to read, to recite the noble Quran, to seek knowledge, to be curious, to always be keen on finding answers. In addition to this, the second command in the noble Quran is Iqra as well. And if this shows anything, it really shows the paramount importance of seeking knowledge from an Islamic perspective. So, with that being said, Sheikh Muhammad, I'd like to highlight a very important issue as we are still at the outset of this webinar, and that's when we speak of knowledge and the noble status of seeking knowledge in Islam.
yeah,
Here we mean knowledge in the comprehensive sense of the word, that we don't only mean a particular field of knowledge or a very specific uh, area or domain of knowledge. Rather, the concept of knowledge in Islam is so comprehensive to the extent that it encompasses all forms of beneficial knowledge.
yeah,
Islam's emphasis, Islam's stress to seek knowledge encompasses all the domains and all the fields that are of interest, that are of benefit to the human being. With that being said, Sheikh Muhammad, I know now the question on the minds of many of our dear viewers is then is there a particular amount of knowledge that every Muslim is required to acquire or
Hmm.
to comprehend and to be aware of? And the answer is yes, because I received this question a lot, and
Uh,
it's really a great
I'm sorry.
opportunity.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like I'm not quite sure if I got the question right. You mean the minimum amount of knowledge, if you can say,
Yeah,
right?
this is the point.
Yeah. So we
Because
we have no maximum. Like it's okay to have maximum. Like there's no maximum actually. So
فوق كل ذي علم عليم.
basically, like the minimum amount of knowledge, right?
Yeah, this is actually very briefly or in a nutshell the answer to this question.
Yeah.
Be- because the point is, and I repeat, the question that I receive a lot, then is there a particular uh, amount of knowledge that's a must on the Muslim
Hmm.
to acquire and to compile and to be familiar with? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So, very briefly, to answer this question, it is the knowledge that pertains to the pillars of Islam and the articles of faith, in addition to the area of expertise of the person, i.e., in very practical terms, if a Muslim, for example, is working in commerce, then in this case, they need to be aware of what is lawful and what is not when it comes to financial transactions. Then,
Yeah.
as the individual moves on in their lives, they will need to acquire more knowledge. And in this regard, they can refer to the people of knowledge. For example, when a person is about to get married, so in this case, they need to understand and to be familiar with and to be aware of the rulings and the guidance of Islam, or what is permissible and what is not, and what is recommended,
Yeah.
and that which is just permissible when it comes to khutbah or engagement and getting married and all of these issues.
Yeah.
So,
So
with
to summarize your point, we can say that as a kid, there are some bases or some basics that I should be aware of, also as an adult, as a Muslim. But the more I grow, the more rules I'm gonna need to know about, right?
definitely yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
exactly. So can we actually summarize the 3 points again so our dear listeners can get to actually catch them in mind? The first one, if you can help me, the first one is the pillars of Islam. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
the knowledge that pertains to the pillars of Islam. So when it comes
Exactly.
to knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowing about the messenger
Yeah.
of Allah Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and all
Alayhi salatu wassalam.
prophets and messengers. When it
Yes.
comes to how to perform the prayer, when it comes to the rulings that pertain to the bahara or the purification,
Yeah.
when it comes to the conditions of the validity of the prayer and what invalidates the prayer. So these are amounts of knowledge, if I may say,
Hmm.
or these are topics that every and each Muslim, man or woman, need to be familiar with. And this is
Exactly.
why we have a report, as a matter of fact, in this regard, and that's the one which states طلب العلم فريضة على كل Muslim, and that's seeking knowledge is a must, is an obligation on
Hmm.
each and every Muslim, man and woman. And here I'd like to pause, if I may, Sheikh Muhammad,
Yeah, please, please.
to further elaborate on this point. How is it the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is very clear in this regard, that this is a requirement when it comes to both the man and the woman, or males and females. So
Yeah.
Islam does not discriminate between either of them in this regard. And this is why we see from the very early days of the mission of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, women were always there to seek knowledge, to know more about their rights, and to have a say in everything that's related to their own lives or their own families, or when it comes to the society at large. And if I may mention here, how is it, for example, we have an entire chapter in the Noble Quran, which is entitled Al-Mujadala or Al-Mujadila,
Yes.
referring to the woman who came to consult the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding rulings that pertain to the family and her relationship with her husband. So my point is, when it comes to seeking knowledge, Islam promotes it to encompass both men and women at all the life stages of the individual.
Yeah, so
So we
may
have
I
some,
comment actually on this point, as for some families actually they just allow, let's say, the father or the mother. Some families they just allow the father. Some other families they just like give like this if we can say mission to the mother to know more about Islam, which is, as you said right now, not that accurate because everyone should have the minimum. It doesn't really matter if I'm a male or female. At the end of the day, I should actually have this amount of knowledge. um, okay, that's amazing, thank you. So moving
yeah,
on, please.
yeah. So with that being said, I'd like to move on, Sheikh Muhammad,
Yeah.
to speak more about how the Quran addresses the importance and even the virtues of seeking knowledge in this regard. So
Hmm.
we have already mentioned that the very first command in the Noble Quran is Iqra, read,
Exactly.
recite. In addition to this, the second command in the Noble Quran is Iqra as well. And if this highlights and stresses anything, it would be the importance and the paramount significance of seeking knowledge and dedicating the necessary time to acquire knowledge. And this is why what we mean by knowledge here is all forms of beneficial knowledge.
Yeah,
With
as
that
this
being said,
question came to
I'd
my
like
mind.
to highlight,
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt
yeah,
you. I mean, as this question actually came to my mind, and I think that it came to other viewers actually minds as well, which is, what do you mean by knowledge? Like all the time you say like knowledge, knowledge. So what do you mean by knowledge? Do you mean knowledge about Islam or worldly like knowledge, or what exactly? You can actually give more time to elaborate this point after you get to finish your point, please.
yeah, definitely. It's a very worthwhile point to further elaborate on, because some people think that Islam's emphasis on seeking knowledge is only confined to knowledge that pertains to the Islamic jurisprudence or knowledge
Yeah.
that have to do with the Noble Quran. Definitely, this is very important. But it is not only limited to the of the articles of faith, of the rulings that pertain to their work. So I can be a medical doctor, I can be an engineer, and still I need to be aware of the rulings of purification. I need to be aware of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I need to be aware of the pillars of fasting and the things that I need to avoid in order not to render my fasting null and void. So this is the balance that Islam enables us and empowers us to strike by knowing that there is this amount that that we need to be aware of,
Hmm.
and Islam encourages us to go beyond this. So, with that being said, there are many other verses of the Noble Quran that speak of the paramount importance and the virtues of seeking knowledge. So,
Yeah,
for
please.
instance, here we have a verse in which Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, and say, O Muhammad, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying, O Allah, O my Lord, increase me in knowledge.
Knowledge.
So this is very powerful because there is nothing else whatsoever that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to to even pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to implore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking for more of it other than knowledge.
Yeah.
So the Prophet ﷺ is not asked to pray for an increase in material wealth
Hmm.
or money or pieces of land or gold. Rather, the only thing is knowledge. And I would leave this to the appreciation of our dear viewers to think about this. How is it even the Prophet ﷺ is urged by Allah
Hmm.
subhanahu wa ta'ala to always be keen on seeking knowledge.
Yeah.
With that being said, let's move to another verse, and that's the
Yeah,
one
please.
in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات. And
Yeah.
that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises the rank or the status of the believers among you and those of knowledge many levels or many ranks or many degrees. So the verse here is telling us clearly that in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reason for attaining higher levels and higher ranks is through knowledge. Not
Yeah,
only
okay. So I just have this comment on my mind. I'm sorry to interrupt you to interrupt the point. Gonna allow you to continue talking about the ayat. That makes me feel like that gives me this feeling of being proud. That my religion actually pushes me or urges me to learn. And to just highlight this one, you mentioned that seeking knowledge doesn't just is about like like knowledge about religion or knowledge about Islam and so on. For me, let's say as a father, whenever I get to learn more, so I get better in my profession. Let's say that I am an engineer, for example, a doctor, whatever I do for a living. So the more I get, the more knowledge I seek for, or the more knowledge I get, the more hasanat I get. Am I correct?
definitely, because
Exactly.
the point also that we will highlight, and how is it seeking knowledge per se is an act of worship through which the individual gets closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And especially kids, because as you know, sometimes um, kids get a little bit bored because of like schoolwork, a lot of like assignments, homework. So
Yeah,
that's a great news for them that the more they study for the school, the more they do that online schooling nowadays, as you know, because of the quarantine and stuff, the
yeah,
more hasanat they're gonna get. Um, so it's not about just like the knowledge about Islam and stuff, but it's all the time but if we can say it's the knowledge about anything, worldly knowledge. Any information gets into your mind, you get more hasanat for it. Am I correct?
definitely yes, definitely yes.
Amazing,
And we
amazing.
will delve more onto this and what needs to be in one's mind in order not in order to get and reap these benefits and these rewards, inshallah.
So you're gonna give us a little bit more of tricks of how to get more hasanat while
Uh,
studying.
yeah, more of strategies. Yeah,
Okay,
and,
that's amazing, please.
and practical steps. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So we mentioned already many verses, And still, there is a very eye-opening verse, and that's the one at the very beginning of Surah Ar-Rahman, as Allah Subhanahu wa Taala tells us in this very chapter, Ar-Rahman علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. So
Mm,
here Allah Subhanahu wa Taala starts this verse by Ar-Rahman. That's Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is the most merciful. Then Allah Subhanahu wa Taala highlights some of His great favors, and that's by highlighting the fact that he has taught the noble Quran. He has revealed the noble Quran to his final and last messenger Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, through the archangel Gabriel, and thus making it accessible as a source of knowledge and as a source of guidance to all humanity. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خلق الإنسان, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has fashioned
okay.
and created the human being. So here it would be very valid to raise the question of how come having taught the Quran is mentioned before having created the human being. So here, this is not an order of time. This is
Mm,
not a matter of chronology. Rather, this is a matter of order when it comes to the status and when it comes to the rank. Because here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned teaching the Quran first, then the creation of the human being to direct our attention to a very subtle meaning, and that's the life of the human being is meaningless without the true guidance of the noble Quran. So
well,
this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran khalaqa al-insan.
yeah,
So
so what I got here, like let me try to summarize and please correct me. So if I actually got what are you saying? So if you can say that Allah arranges points in order. So Ar-Rahman علم al-Quran. So first He teaches the Quran, then خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. So like if we would like to live happily and stuff, we really need to get to like learn. Whether we learn the Quran or the instructions, or we get to know like how to live better on earth and stuff. Am I
guide,
correct? You can correct me,
guide,
please.
the guidance of the noble Quran. So here it is not a matter of which one of them happened first, but rather what like the order of the importance and the significance of each one
Y-
of them to
Yeah.
highlight the fact that the meaningfulness of the life of the human being
Hmm.
stems from having the guidance that regulates and that uh, enlightens the presence of the human being and the existence of the individual in this life.
Okay.
So
Okay.
here, I can go on and mention many and several verses from the Noble Quran. But
Yeah. Please.
with all of the verses that we have mentioned, I'd like also to mention some of the ahadith or some of the statements from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam
Alayhi
that
salatu wassalam.
consolidate this meaning and this notion of the significance and the virtues of seeking knowledge from an Islamic perspective.
Yeah.
There is a hadith that I do really think each and every Muslim needs to always have it right in front of their eyes whenever they woke up
Hmm.
every day.
Like
And
something you do in the very early morning, whenever you just like get up and stuff. Okay.
yeah, this
So
is
you
also
start your day with your hadith.
exactly like it needs to be there in one's closest items to always be reminded of this hadith,
Hmm.
because of how important it is
Wow.
in shaping the attitude, the day-to-day attitude of the Muslim.
Oh,
And
do I know this hadith? Looks pretty so important and interesting.
it is so,
Yeah, please mention this hadith.
it is, and that's the one in which in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Messenger of
Alayhi
Allah
salatu wassalam.
sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tells us, "Man salaka طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له به طريقا إلى الجنة." That when the Muslim starts or embarks on a way or starts a path of seeking knowledge, with each and every effort made and every step taken and every second spent on seeking this knowledge and
Hmm.
being on the path of the quest for knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will facilitate the path to paradise for them. So
Wow.
imagine the impact of such hadith on the life of each and every individual.
Yeah, please,
Especially,
please, ma'am, can I
especially,
ask you to
yeah,
actually say the hadith again because I find it super interesting. So would you please like say the hadith again so our dear listeners can get to like pay more attention to the hadith, please?
def- definitely. So the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have
Hmm.
said that whoever takes the effort
Yeah.
or ever embarks on the journey
Hmm.
or the path to seeking knowledge, with every effort that they will exert, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy for them to take the path to paradise.
Well, it's like an investment. I invest. Right,
Exactly.
like I don't know how can we say this, but it's just about like buying like coins, like the more I work, like the more I get to learn more knowledge and stuff, the more opportunity, or if I can say it becomes a little bit easier for me to go there to Jannah. Whoa, so it's like an investment, like work here, so we're gonna find the reflection over there. Amazing.
Definitely. It's a worthwhile and a very productive investment, especially
Hmm.
when we have in our mind the fact that knowledge in Islam encompasses all forms of beneficial knowledge, all
Yeah.
genres and all domains
Hmm.
uh, of knowledge that are productive to humanity and to the human civilization. So imagine this is how we start our day, that we start our day with the intention of acquiring more knowledge, with accumulating and compiling more knowledge. And this is why repeatedly we find in the Islamic literature the saying, for example, from our mother Aisha, the mother of the believers, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her.
Yeah, the
She
wife of the Prophet. Alayhi salatu
definitely,
wasalam.
yeah, she is reported to have said that if one day passes without acquiring and attaining more knowledge, this day is not counted as one of my life. This is a wasted day. This is a day that didn't contribute to my life. So,
Wow.
so you see here the perspective of the meaning of life, because we are always keen to look into the meaning of life and having a purposeful life. So
Hmm.
this is very important purpose, that the real meaning and the real investment in one's lifetime is by acquiring more knowledge.
Yeah.
So with doing so, our life becomes really meaningful, because this is how we develop, this is how we promote ourselves, this is how we elevate ourselves, this is how we cultivate uh, better qualities. This is how we enhance the quality of our lives, and that's by seeking knowledge.
Yeah, this this story about the mother of the believers, Aisha, made me a little bit I don't know, like sad. I can say I don't know, like how can I actually get to like deliver my feeling because like sometimes you get busy a little and you have a lot of responsibilities, so you do not get to learn something new. But if we actually try to notice what she was actually trying to do, which is like she was trying all the time, all the day, night, if we can say, to get new information or to get to study something new, and she never count it as a day, right? Like if she didn't get into something like any new information or something, she's not gonna count it as a day. Am I correct?
Yeah, this is exactly the meaning that she's trying to convey through these words. And Sheikh Muhammad, what you have just mentioned of
Please.
feeling missing out when we don't learn something new.
Yeah.
There's very insightful saying in this regard by Imam Al Hassan al Basri.
Hmm.
Uh, he has a saying which is very, very significant in this context. He says, Yabna Adam, O son of Adam, or O child or daughter of Adam, you are in essence days compiled and put upon each other. So, with the passage of each day, a piece of you is gone.
Hmm.
You see the image that he or the metaphor that he is trying to draw here, that the human being in essence is time. So, our presence in essence in this world is all the time that is put together, all the days that are compiled together. And this is why he says, with the passage of each day, a piece or part of you is gone. So, this is why we need to make sure that when a very essential part of our essence is spent, that it is spent on something worthwhile and of benefit.
Hmm. So, like listening to this hadith, actually, um, I just wonder how well they actually, dedicate themselves to know more about the knowledge, like to know more about Islam, whether Islam or whether any other points. Like you really, whenever you get to listen to these stories, you feel how well they pay attention to it and how much effort and time they just invest on this. And subhanallah, in the past, the most honored people, if you can say, are like scholars, the people who get a lot of knowledge and stuff. This is why we know, like that in the Islamic history, when people actually used to, um, to apply Islam as it should be, we have a lot of like Muslims had a lot of books, Muslims had a lot of inventions, Muslim had a lot of knowledge about so many topics, like every single topic, actually, if you can say, Muslims tried a lot to get more and more about that. So Imam Hussein, I just have this point for you. Would you please tell me a little more about the right approach to seek knowledge? How can we get to seek knowledge? Like we talked a lot about the importance of seeking knowledge, and I feel that I want to learn now. But tell me, how can I do this as a Muslim? How can I learn, and in the very same time, Allah feels like Allah gets pleased because of the things that I do?
Yeah, this is a very important point, and you have highlighted many important points, and I can see that uh, given how important and how significant this topic is, I think we will need to, inshallah, dedicate at least two more webinars
Two.
to cover all the points that need to be covered when it comes to speaking of the significance and the etiquettes of seeking knowledge, and especially when it comes to, as you have just mentioned, Sheikh Muhammad, the legacy of the early Muslim scholars, and we need this at this time to uh, to really appreciate what we have today of technologies and accessibility to sources of knowledge. So definitely we will be talking more on this and the stories, the very inspiring stories of the early Muslim scholars across the centuries, even when it comes to their dedication uh, and um their efforts, their amazing and incredible uh, efforts and endeavors to acquire knowledge. So we will be talking about all of this, inshallah. And let me here focus on this very important question, which you have highlighted, Sheikh Muhammad, and that's what is the right approach to seeking knowledge.
Yeah,
I
please.
cannot stress enough how repeatedly and how frequently I get this question from young Muslims from all the four corners of the globe. And to provide the answer to this question, I'd like to mention here uh, the advice of Imam Shafi'i. May Allah have mercy on him. Of course,
Allahumma ameen.
of course, he is the founder of one of the major and the very insignificant schools of Islamic jurisprudence, and that's the Shafi'i school of jurisprudence. So,
Yeah,
in this regard, Imam Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy on him, he says, أخي لن تنال العلم إلا بستة سأنبيك عن تفصيلها ببياني. So he says, "O my brother, or O seeker, that you will be able, or for you to be able to acquire knowledge, you need to keep in mind 6 points."
hmm.
And he says, I will elaborate in, or when it comes to, and elaborate on informing you and explaining, or the process of elucidating these 6 points. He says, ذكاء وحرص واجتهاد وبلغة وصحبة أستاذ وطول زمان. So he mentions first ذكاء,
Yeah,
and and that's to be smart, to be alert, and that's the ability to understand, the ability to fathom, and this is by nature is endowed uh, uh, in every human being out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the question now is, can this level of smartness be increased? And the answer is yes. How? Through being pious, through being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or through taqwa, dhaka can be increased. So being conscious and being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the path to increase and to attain a higher level of being smart. And this is why, in this regard, Imam Shafi'i is reported to have said that he he felt at a certain point of his life, when he was young and still seeking knowledge, that he is no longer able to memorize quickly, because we know that Imam Shafi'i, he had a very powerful and a very sharp memory,
yeah,
to the extent that he would just read the page once, and with this he have
He gets
memorized
memorize it.
he have memorized to the extent that he would even put his hand on the other page so that his eyes would not get also on the second page, otherwise they will be memorized together. So you are speaking of like a scanning memory
Yeah,
system.
like a scanner, like I mean, like there are cameras in there.
So
Um,
Imam Shafi'i tells us the secret, if you like, behind having such memory and being so smart and being so alert when it comes to acquiring knowledge. So he says, one day I went to my sheikh, and his name was Waki',
yeah.
in order to tell him what shall I do in order to maintain this high level of the capacity to learn
Hmm.
and memorize very quickly. And he says, he has guided me to being away from sins. So being
Hmm.
mindful and being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the sure way to having a smart and genius mind. So this is a very important piece of news to each and every one of our dear viewers, and definitely it's a reminder for all of us. So this is the point that
So if we like, if you allow me to summarize your point according to what I understood for sure,
yeah,
that if like for example I have any difficulty learning anything or something, or if I even want to boost and improve, like if we can say like enhance the abilities of learning, absorbing new information and stuff, I just need to be more pious. Like I need to take care of like my prayers and everyday like Islamic actions. And I really need to have this feeling that Allah is with me all the time. I feel that Allah is watching me, is with me. So Allah give me that spiritual, if I can say support. Like He give me blessings, His blessings and gifts. So
yeah.
He makes my mind a little bit more aware of information, and I can get to understand things in a better way. Am I correct?
Definitely, this is the very first
Hmm.
piece of guidance that Imam Shafi'i shares with the knowledge seekers.
And I heard also about this situation that Imam Shafi'i said, if you can allow me to say it, when he just had the situation, then it actually affected his memory in a negative way. Then he went to his teacher,
Yeah.
and the teacher gave him this piece of advice, which is be aware of sins, so your abilities are going to be there still, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is the point of guarding the senses
Hmm.
and being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that one's faculties and one's senses are
Hmm.
utilized only in that which is of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and definitely seeking knowledge is on top of them. So this is the first point when it comes to the approach of seeking knowledge that Imam Shafi'i highlights. Then he goes on to mention wahirs, and that's to be serious, to be keen on seeking knowledge, when it comes to acquiring knowledge, when it comes to having the sources of knowledge, like acquiring the right books and being very meticulous and very serious and very
Hmm.
alert when it
Hmm.
comes to one's time. So here he highlights this point of being dedicated, being alert to acquiring knowledge. So the idea here is to have a clear vision and to act on it, because this is always the attitude of the knowledge seekers, that they have a clear goal and they know very well how to utilize their sources, what is available for them, and
Hmm.
their time, which is most importantly here, in order to achieve their goal of seeking knowledge.
As
Then,
if you start up a project, then you just try to count all the possible ways and all the possible obstacles that will allow you to get into your destination and will allow you to get to achieve your goal.
Definitely.
If you can summarize, the first one is being pious, like the fear of Allah and getting this spiritual like support that comes from Allah. The second one is preparing yourself and
Serious,
trying to,
yeah, and hers or being serious.
yeah,
Then Imam
being serious
al-Ghazali,
about this one.
yeah, and then Imam al-Ghazali speaks of ijtihad, and that's doing and exerting one's utmost and doing one's best to acquire knowledge and to seek knowledge. So this is why when we look into the biographies of the well-known and the prominent Muslim scholars, we read in their biographies how is it they would not only acquire knowledge from the scholars in their own country or their own homeland, rather, they travel. So, for example, if they were born in El Andalus or
Yeah.
nowadays Spain, and
Mm,
we have here the story of Taqi ibn Makhlad. How is it he was born in Cordoba, today is Cordoba in Spain. Uh, how is it he traveled for 5 years? It took him 5 years to go to Egypt to acquire knowledge and to listen to hadith and to compile the statements of the Prophet ﷺ from the scholars who were in Egypt. Then he traveled to Mecca and Medina, then to Baghdad in Al Iraq in order to acquire knowledge. And we will mention his story in more details, inshallah, in the upcoming webinar. So, this is the point here, Sheikh Muhammad, ijtihad, doing one's best. So
sure.
this is why they would not waste their time on trivial things. If it is needed to travel, they travel. They dedicate the necessary time. They create, if I may say, and set the right atmosphere for seeking knowledge. So this is the ijtihad or exerting one's utmost that Imam Shafi'i highlights here in this regard. Then he says وَبُلْغَةٌ. And here he actually is speaking of having what is necessary to fulfill
Mm,
one's basic needs when it comes to eating and drinking and having the proper accommodation, which is here highlights the point of the scholarship to have what is needed in order to be able to dedicate yourself, or for the knowledge seeker to be able to dedicate all of their being to acquiring knowledge, so that he
yeah.
or she are in a position to focus on seeking knowledge. And this is why the Muslim scholars in this regard they say, in order to get part of the knowledge, you need to dedicate your whole being to acquiring knowledge. So this is the point of having the bulgha, or what is necessary to be sufficient to fulfill one's needs, one's basic needs, in order to be in a position to focus on seeking knowledge. Then Imam
Yeah.
al-Ghazali moves to the fifth point, uh, speaking of the right approach to seeking knowledge, and that's وَصُحْبَةُ أُسْتَاذٍ, and that's having the company of the alim, the sheikh, or the scholar,
Yeah.
having to spend the right and necessary period of time in the company of the scholar. And this is very important, and I really need to pause
As the
here.
Sahaba did in the past, as they did, like companions of the Prophet, his friends used to be like in his company all the time, so that they can get to learn the practical religion, how it can, like whether Islam, Hadith, and stuff, or whether the practical things. So صحبة أستاذ means like to be in the company of a
Company of the
teacher
sheikh
or
or the
scholar.
alim or the teacher or the scholar. And this is very important, especially given what we witness nowadays. Um, it is very uh, disheartening what we witness sometimes of people who just spent 3 months And this is all what they did to acquire knowledge. And then only based on this, they start issuing fatwas. And they think that with this, they are in a position to teach people and to say who is right and who is wrong and who is even going to paradise and who is not. So this is the point that we need to understand, that the process of acquiring knowledge, it's a process that takes time. And this is why the Muslim scholars in their writings and in their literature, they always highlight the importance of spending time in the company of the alim or the scholar.
Mm,
So this is why you find, for example, even the companions who narrated um, a big number of statements on the authority of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they mention how that they spent so many years in the company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when it comes to the students of the founders of the Islamic schools of jurisprudence, they spent tens of years in order to acquire this knowledge and to have this in-depth understanding of the Islamic jurisprudence. So the point is, specialization needs to be respected as much as for an individual to become a medical doctor or to become a certified engineer or a
mm.
nurse or a law practitioner, they take the time. They have to study. They need to dedicate many years to study this, and then they graduate, and then they spend years in order to be in a position to have the experience still
Life investment.
under the supervision of specialists in the field. This is also the case when it comes to acquiring knowledge in the general sense of the word, and in particular when it comes to Islamic jurisprudence and when it comes to branches of knowledge that pertain to the noble Islamic Sharia. And I would even go to the extent of saying that so much of the negative phenomena and so many of these unpleasant phenomena, the root cause for all of them and the root cause for the occurrence of all of this is due to lacking this point, lacking spending the necessary time in the company of the ulama and in the company of the scholars. And if I may mention here the saying of one of the students of Imam Malik, that he says, I spent uh, more than 20 years in the company of Imam Malik.
Oh,
And he
20
says,
years.
yeah, and listen to this. And he says, I just spent a very limited number of them acquiring from the knowledge of Imam Malik. And I spent most of them learning and promoting myself from the noble manners of Imam Malik. And then he goes on to say, and I wish I had spent more years learning
Wow.
from the noble manners of Imam Malik. So,
Wow.
so this is a point of being in the company of the alim or being in the company of the sheikh, that it is not only by watching a couple of videos on YouTube or reading a couple of PDF books on the internet, and thus the person becomes a alim or a scholar and then in a position to give fatwas and so on. Rather, the right approach is to dedicate one's years of study to acquiring the knowledge first. And this is why, for example, the Muslim scholars in their literature, they say that
Mm.
never ever acquire knowledge from a sahafi nor a mushafi, not to acquire knowledge from a person whose knowledge is attained only from the books, but they
Mm.
didn't have the sheikh who would explain and help them understanding the books. So the books alone is not enough for the making or for the qualification of a scholar or alim. But a
You're
scholar,
talking about the one which is related to the Islamic religion specifically, right?
exactly,
So,
exactly.
but I mean, for other professions, it's okay to just like read so many books and to study so many things, and you can
Still,
be
it is
actually
not
good in your
enough.
profession, right?
Still,
Um,
still, this is part of it, but the foundation has to be in the company of specialists in the field and scholars and experts in the field. This is a
hmm,
universal law that you cannot on your own just become a scholar. But so, especially when it comes to, and to be more focused here, when it comes to the branches of knowledge that pertain to the noble Islamic Sharia and pertain to
yeah.
the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Alayhi salatu wassalam.
So this is
So
why,
to summarize your point, that to be able to give fatwas and stuff, because we hear so many people actually that give fatwas nowadays while they're not actually that qualified, just reading a book or just reading an ayah and trying to just get to understand the meaning of it isn't enough for you to give fatwa, or it isn't enough for you to give a specific Islamic ruling. But there is a sequence they need to follow in order to be an Islamic faqih, the one who's qualified and allowed to give fatwa and to talk about the Islamic religion's ruling, if we can say.
yeah, and all branches of knowledge, like when it comes to the to tafsir, when it
Hmm,
comes to fiqh, when it comes to usul al-fiqh, all these are branches of knowledge that require
the Islamic
spending
one.
the right time and the necessary period of time in the company of the scholar. And this is why, like I said, they said, لا تأخذ العلم من صحفي ولا مصحفي. That's don't
Hmm,
ever seek to acquire knowledge from a Sahafi. That's someone who has only acquired knowledge through reading books, because this is not enough to have what it takes to become a Muslim scholar.
which is
And
good, like reading books is good as a first step, or
uh,
as
in the
as
company
steps.
of alim, or in the company of a alim who would be able to guide and who would be able to correct, because one book is not enough, because we know there are types of books and we will be talking more about this. So this is why they said لا تأخذ العلم من صحفي ولا مصحفي. And
Hmm,
even when it comes to the noble Quran, don't seek to learn the correct manner of the recitation of the Noble Quran and the rulings of reciting the Noble Quran, or the rulings of legislation in the Noble Quran, only from someone who just read the Quran, but he
hmm,
didn't have a sheikh or a scholar who taught him all of this. Because if the person depends only on himself or herself alone and only, their mistakes will outweigh and will exceed their right doings, because it is a matter of methodology. And this is why when the Muslim scholars speak of this point, Sheikh Muhammad, they speak of the components of knowledge. So
hmm,
they say that knowledge essentially has three components. The first of them is the sources.
hmm,
Then they speak of al-manhaj, or the methodology. That's the rigorous approach of acquiring this knowledge. And then the third component, and that's the qualifications and the credentials that need to be fulfilled in the person becoming knowledgeable. So we have three components: the sources, the methodology,
hmm,
and the credentials and the qualifications that need to be fulfilled and met in the person becoming knowledgeable. In very practical terms,
hmm.
would it be sufficient to go to a medical uh, physician who only have the books, or in addition to having the books of medicine, they need to have learned how
Practice.
to diagnose and how to conduct an operation?
Hmm,
Definitely, it is not enough. Okay, is it only enough even to just have the medical books and how a certain diagnosis or how a certain medical operation is conducted? Or you need to make sure, in addition to this, that this person in particular or per se has all what it takes of credentials and qualifications, that they know how to operate and how to diagnose. So this is why the three of these components, or the three of
Must be
these
found.
requirements need to be fulfilled and met in the person. So as much as, and this is a very important point that
Hmm.
I'd like to share with all our dear respected viewers, that as much as we dedicate uh, the necessary time to find out who is the right medical doctor or right lawyer to refer to, and we ask for recommendations,
Hmm.
and we view reviews on this matter, and we ask people with experience.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
this also
Someone who
needs
has knowledge and someone who has experience.
it
And we all the time try to get the best person whenever we ever get to someone who just read an article, for example, about like medicine or something, and we get
so,
to ask him to give us a
yeah.
specific, guidance or something. Yeah.
Definitely. So this is why, by the same token, this also needs to be our stance and our position when it comes to whom we refer to find out about Islam, or if you have a question about a ruling about Islam, or we need to learn more about Islam. This also needs to be our approach, and not ever to belittle or underestimate the importance of seeking the right person to ask, and the right entity or group of people to refer to when it comes to a matter like this. I'm
Yeah.
aware that we are running out of
Yeah,
time.
actually, I believe that the topic is so juicy. Like there are so many points actually to mention, so many points to elaborate,
Yeah,
so many points to talk about.
yeah,
Thank you so much for all the information that you mentioned. Before we just get to end this, just to highlight one of the points that you mentioned, when it comes to so many people, whenever they just get to read one of the ayat of the Quran, then whether they get the impression or they, like maybe they get a wrong impression or something, or maybe they start acting upon this ayah while they misunderstand the ayah,
yeah,
and then they start giving whether themselves Islamic rulings or whether to others, you know. So, as you mentioned over here, which is a way too important point, thank you so much for mentioning this point, which is, I cannot go into a fight, if I can say, if I'm not ready. I cannot get to drive a car if I do not have whether the practical knowledge about this one and also like the theoretical one. So, so many people get to give like get to talk about the Islamic religion, get to talk about fatwas whenever getting the sound knowledge and even the practical one. So, as a summarization for the last part of your speech, being able to give these fatwas and all these points requires you a lot of work and a lot of things, but it is okay to get to try to understand the ayat of the Quran. You get to get the meanings of the Quran according to like your feeling and stuff. So thank you so much, Imam, for all of your precious information, all of the stories, the hadith and the ayat you mentioned about seeking knowledge. And you also mentioned like a really cool like cool point, which is that people used to travel from a place to another in 5 years and stuff. You know, if I have a flash memory, I can get like an encyclopedia in this flash memory, so it's getting easier. And inshallah, I believe that with the next webinars, you're gonna get to talk a little bit more about how practical we can get to apply these information that you actually talked about, and how can we really get to gain more knowledge or to get more knowledge by just studying or by just having a fixed intention and stuff. So if you can say like the next one's gonna be a little bit more practical, inshallah. So all of you dear viewers, inshallah, make sure that you never miss the next one, which is gonna be the next Thursday. And as you know well, that every single Thursday we have this webinar. It's live. You can easily like ask us whatever you want. Inshallah, we're gonna read the question to Imam Hussein, and inshallah, he's gonna make make sure that he will answer it. Also, if you have any question of mine related to any part of the Islamic religion, make sure that you message us on the page. Inshallah, we're going to make sure that we help you as much as possible. If you want us to talk about one of the topics, if there is actually one of the points that you'd like to highlight, please as well leave us a comment. Give us your feedback about this webinar. Give us your ideas about the things we can actually discuss, inshallah, in the next upcoming times. Next time is going to be Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure, everyone, that you never miss it. Thank you, Imam Hussein. Thank you, dear brothers and sisters, for your investment. If I can say, like, can we consider this as seeking knowledge? Like, Imam? Like, can we
Definitely,
invest, can we
definitely
consider
yes.
listening to this live video as
Definitely yes, and this is the whole point of having it.
exactly. Thank you so much. And inshallah, we will see you all next time. So, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.